welcome everybody to this event tonight. This is being hosted by the Oregon Community Rights Network. For those that aren't familiar with the organization, it is really made up of a network of local chapters and individuals who have been working for a number of years now in Oregon to really try to institute local democracy, community control, local decision-making power, really largely coming from the overreach of corporate interests who are dictating the realities of on the ground life in communities in Oregon from all kinds of vantage points, whether it's socially, economically, environmentally. And so the people from the Community Rights Network here in Oregon have been working for quite some time at their local level, as well as now at the state level, to I think both make people more aware of how the system functions and why we've been put into this position of really not being the key decision makers in our own community, and that there's something we can do about that. So the work's driven by a high degree of the need to educate, but also activate people into really changing systems. And so I feel like tonight's topic of mutual aid really works well with what the community rights activists and communities have been engaged in. And I know hearing from some of those people leading up to today, there's really high interest in understanding more of the world of mutual aid, how that may work into the community rights realm, understanding where this all emerges from, how it works, and I think ideally, I would presume how we systemically change things. So the kinds of activities that we're engaged in perhaps aren't in the crisis mode that they often seem to be in, but we really shift the landscape and what our communities look like in Oregon from all kinds of vantage points. So thank you very much for being here, everyone, and especially to our speakers. As a quick introduction to myself, my name is Kai Hushka. I'm the board president for the Oregon Community Rights Network. I also work as an organizer for the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. I've been working with the community rights communities for a number of years now in Oregon to try to make this systemic change, the shift, and how things get governed and really who decides. So that's who I am, if you were wondering who I am and why I'm leading this parade at the moment. I do want to just kind of quickly get into our topic tonight, and to do so, if you hadn't tracked who our speakers were, based on signing up to be here this evening, I'm going to quickly read what they had offered us as sort of quick background and who they are, and I'm sure during tonight's event they may reveal more about who they are and where they come from, and really motivates them to do the work that they're engaged in. But we have two speakers here this evening. We have Lisa Lake. Lisa's the director of Advocacy 5. It's a Portland-based organization focusing on creating sustainable pathways into permanent housing for the houseless community. To date, the Advocacy 5 organization has initiated 107 peer-to-peer loans that have successfully matched community members with houseless and housing insecure individuals, helping them to step into housing or maintain their current housing during tough financial times. Lisa also works and organizes as a trained medic and crisis worker for Equitable Workers offering community support, also known as EWOCs, and they've been present at the Black Lives Matter protests. Our other speaker here tonight is Randal Wyatt. Randal is the founder of a group called Taking Ownership PDX, which facilitates grassroots community organizing for self-improvement for Black elders and families in Portland. It launched shortly after the Black Lives Matter protests came to Portland following the murder of George Floyd, and has since been featured in prominent local media outlets like Portland Monthly, Willamette Week, Portland Mercury, KBOO, and others. Randal brings a lifetime of organizing to the program, which provides grassroots repair services for Black homes and business owners in Portland. So super honored and excited to have both of you here this evening. And talking about the lead up today, you both expressed to me you wanted to kind of keep this organic and conversational, and I think that would be great. As I said at the beginning, it would be nice to know either individually or otherwise, how this mutual aid work really evolves, how it operates, I guess what it means, not just for Portland, but let's say nationally speaking. Anything you can help us understand more clearly about this world would be much, much appreciated. I'm going to hand it over to you, Lisa, to start, to present, to talk on whatever you would like to. And then Randall, you can come in, and from there, you guys could definitely have a conversation with each other back and forth to help us better understand. And in the meantime, I'm guessing there'll be questions and things coming in through chat, and we'll take it from there. So we'll keep it pretty lax and pretty informal. But again, thank you to the both of you for being here, and I will mute myself and hand it over the mic, so to speak, over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you for hosting. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Randall, for co-participating. I'm Lisa Lake with Advocacy 5. That's my nonprofit in Portland, which started out as a grassroots and still is a grassroots organization of volunteers who are doing outreach on the streets in Southeast and deep Southeast Portland, doing everything from feeding the homeless to providing food for them, coordinating with different food groups who were distributing food, water, and also creating funding for sleeping bags, tents, personal necessities, survival gear, as we call it. That evolved into my need to go another step further. We created a few other orgs that were doing the grassroots on the ground reaches. I remained in a fundraising position, and then began looking at how are we not just stemming this, putting a Band-Aid on everything, but how are we going to systemically change people moving from the street up into housing? And the biggest thing that we found about that after years, I've been doing this for over 40 years, was that they need funding to get up and out. They can go to job training, they can get a job, but that lack of initial funding for deposits and for wardrobe for work and for cars and car maintenance was lacking. So people were getting into jobs, and then they were losing those jobs because they were not dressed professionally, they couldn't shower, they couldn't take care of themselves. So I started this peer-to-peer loan system where I reached out to the community and said, listen, I have a 27-year-old male who's been on the streets for 2 or 3 years. He has now procured a job through some job training. He needs to get into housing to be able to keep this, this trend going of upward, mobility. I look out into the community. I say he needs $2,700, and it may be one person that grants the whole $2,700. It might be 3 people who do it, 4 people, 5 people, but we set up an MOU, memorandum of understanding between the contributors and the recipients, and they have 60 days to begin paying back this no interest loan, and they have up to 2 years, depending on their budgets, which we look over closely. How can they pay this back without further burdening them? So that's been my work for about the last 3 years. Mutual aid wise, that is mutual aid in its essence, right? The community, reaching out to the community, bringing them in to solve problems that major nonprofits are not, with the millions of dollars of funding they have, not solving. Within a year and a half, we had housed 87 people. And I think that the closest any of the other nonprofits had come to who were dealing with big housing, being able to access housing from builders, I think that we beat them by about housing 10 more people within that year. We're a group of maybe 6 people. So there's a way, and it doesn't always have to involve government. It doesn't always have to involve, red tape and all of that. So Randall shaking his head, he knows this. There's a way to skirt around that. And I am really good at skirting around all of that. So we've created this community, this community of givers who are now housing people on the regular. We have moved it now to Eugene, where we are on tonight. I just got an email, our 17th loan down there being filled and getting people into housing or keeping them in housing, which is kind of our biggest thing right now with COVID. People have lost their jobs. They need to be shored up until they can find a way back to sustainability. I also have been involved, like Kai said, in the Black Lives Matter protest. A few of the Black leaders got a hold of a few of us who had been doing this work as medics and crisis workers in other ways, to put together a team to be on the ground during the Black Lives Matter protests. So we go out every night with at least one team, sometimes two, of a medic, a crisis worker, a protector who kind of watches our backs, and then a runner who goes for whatever we need if we have stuff in the truck. That's another way that we have been dealing with the mutual aid at the Black Lives Matter protest. Then the fires hit, and we pivoted to a mutual aid station that we set up on the, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the mall, Blade Center Mall. We took over the AMC, the defunct theater. We took over their parking lot and set up a huge mutual aid station. Within hours, we had so many groups, outreach groups, bringing in a full kitchen to cook hot meals, coordinating in their neighborhoods to bring clothing in, sorting it, personal hygiene. We had the mechanics. We actually have an outfit called the Street Mechanics, and they were there fixing cars for people who were fleeing the fires. There were the bike mechanics were there fixing bikes for houseless people. We had media there who were doing all kinds of stories about the fires and people fleeing them. And we worked in tandem because right around the corner was the Red Cross. But the Red Cross was only admitting so many people per night, and they had a lot of restrictions on who they were admitting, for their aid. And a lot of shelters weren't giving 3 meals a day. They weren't giving clothing. So people who were fleeing from the fire might have had a place to stay, but they had no access to any other kinds of goods. It was a beautiful thing. It was 3 days, and then we moved it further on down the line once the lines opened up to people returning to their homes further south in Clackamas. We moved it for another 3 or 4 days before, closing it down because people were back home and they had what they needed. They were back at work, back at school, back at all the things they were doing. So those are the ways that we have been doing this kind of mutual aid. It takes a village, takes a community. And we got tired of waiting for the brass to give us the okay, the endless meetings we had to sit through to make sure that we were, the right people to do the job. We just got the community together and started hammering out a plan, and we just did it. And we didn't ask permission to be on this parking lot that we were from the state, from the city, from anybody. We knew it was privately owned. And about 2 days into the mutual aid station, a real estate agent showed up and he said, this is co-owned by 4 different people. They're in California. They just wanted to know what was going on their property. And I explained to him, feel free, walk around, take videos for them. About 2 hours after that, two of the owners called me and thanked me for doing this, and asked if they could use their videos, our videos of this mutual aid station as something that they were part of by gifting their parking lot, which was really, really interesting to me. They probably would have said no if I went to them just for liability, but my nonprofit's bonded and insured. And it was just a beautiful experience. And I think Portland is going to have to move, and especially with the Black Lives Matters protests and all the unrest and the unveiling of the disenfranchised not being in on the game, not being in on the money, not being in on the, all the things that come with so-called established nonprofits who deal with this. I think there's going to be a huge amount of mutual aid from the community going forward. And I think that's just going to be a fascinating thing. And now I'll give it over to Randall.
Awesome. I love what you're doing, Lisa. Love it. Yeah, I'm Randall, Portland native, born and raised in Southeast and Northeast Portland. Saw the changes happen. My family moved out of Portland to Happy Valley right after I graduated high school, so we didn't get really impacted by the gentrification individually or personally because they made the choice to move out of there. But I watched it happen. I saw a lot of my friends' families get pushed out. And so basically, I made a name in this community you know, basically as a hip hop artist, I've used my platform as a hip hop artist to do a lot of community activism over the span of my entire adult life, whether it's doing like benefit concerts, you know, clothing drives. I was collaborating with Parks and Rec, Boys and Girls Club, doing a lot of youth-oriented activities like talent shows, and just giving youth. I primarily worked with youth over the course of my my time, and it developed into jobs like becoming a mentor for Black and Brown youth on probation. So I worked pretty heavily in the judicial area, helping them transition off of probation. I started an initiative about 3 years ago, which was a Measure 11 prevention and reform effort, where we went around to schools and educated young people on what Measure 11 was, because I worked closely with juveniles that were convicted of Measure 11, and one of the big things that I took away from that was they didn't even know what it was until they were convicted of it. And a lot of adults in this state didn't know what Measure 11 was. So that was a big project for me that made a pretty big name for myself, and gained a lot of trust within the community with that initiative. And so basically after the George Floyd murder, I'm very vocal about we got it. Measure 11 is actually 20, I think it might be 22 different crimes that fall under this measure, to where you get mandatory minimum sentencing. The lowest crime is 5 years, 7 months. And so, and it affects 15-year-olds upward. So there were, 15-year-olds are catching in the lowest crime of Measure 11, and they are, and they're losing out on their entire teen years. And then obviously the highest being life. So that's what Measure 11 was. And the ways you can catch in Measure 11 were pretty ridiculous. I mean, they could be like fist fights and stuff like that. So yeah, basically that's how I gained trust. That's how I've gained a name. And I've been very outspoken. I'm currently at Portland State finishing my bachelor's in Black Studies and Social Science. So I share a lot of material, a lot of things that I learned in that, a lot of my experiences as a biracial Black man. I'm pretty vocal about that. And so when the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery happened, a lot of people reached out to me and were like, "Hey man, I mean, how do we help the Black community? How do we help marginalized communities?" And I told them, we need economic justice. We need money. Historically, we have been excluded from a lot of economic opportunities that would build generational wealth. And so I was like, if you want to use, what we need is equity. So we need a little extra help than you do because of historical contexts like, exclusionary laws and systemic oppression. I had really no clue. I don't know why property got involved, but I learned pretty quickly that owning property and keeping property, which has been very difficult for the Black community in Portland, is the quickest way to build equity and build generational wealth. So me seeing that my neighborhoods that I grew up in, where the Black communities were dwindling at a rapid rate over the last 10 years, felt like, well, if we're going to use money, let's use it to try to maintain the Black community homeowners and business owners. And people thought it was a great idea. So I found a home. Just one person reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I got all these things that I could use help with." And I made a post on Facebook. I was like, "All right, I found somebody. This is all they need. Who has resources? Who wants to volunteer?" I was very naive when I first started this 4 months ago. It's crazy how much I've learned in 4 months. And I was thinking that we can just get a bunch of volunteers and start swinging hammers at homes. Nah, not the best way to go about it. So, people started volunteering, people started sending me money. I didn't really even think about money. I was thinking like we could just go out, get some stuff donated and start fixing homes that way. But people started just sending money to my personal Venmo at a pretty, in large amounts. So I started just saying, so the climate's changing. Similar to what Lisa's saying, like I've been on a number of committees. I've sat on so many groups. I've worked for nonprofits. a number of nonprofits. I've been to so many like seminars and this, that, where they just talk and talk and plan and talk and plan. And I was just like, nah, all right, you're sending me money, I'm gonna go fix this house. So I got my buddy, really close friend, who's a contractor, and he came out and he started, writing down all the things that needed to be fixed. He got the resources and I funded it. From there, other families started reaching out, like, I heard this is what you're doing, and then more money came in, and then eventually I just decided, all right, well, I better at least make an LLC out of this and find me a fiscal sponsor. So we are still we're in the process of becoming a 501c3, but currently we are an LLC with a fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor is Friends of Noise, which is another Black-owned nonprofit organization that has my heart because they provide musical opportunities for youth. And so it's like a perfect tandem. And so then all of a sudden news outlets started hearing about what we're doing. And all of a sudden I'm on Portland Monthly and I'm on the local news on Channel 8, Fox, what have you. The latest, I just did an interview with CNN. Kamal Bell's show, United Shades of America, will be on the next season. So it really just took off so fast. And from there, after we got the fiscal sponsor, we did a big fundraiser, raised $100,000 in a month. And currently, after a big, I think it was the Sunday news on Channel 8, all of a sudden we had this influx of home referrals. So now we're sitting at about 55 home referrals. So we have about 55 families that we're currently prioritizing weatherization and life safety issues at the homes. We're not focusing on cosmetic stuff as we head into winter. We want to make sure the homes are safe, dry, and warm for them. We're doing a lot of roof jobs, a lot of landscaping, just to keep, make sure the foundations are good. We're replacing windows, looking into leaks in the walls. Things of that nature are our primary focus for now, until we can become a 501c3 and potentially get some state funding or get some grants as well. We have about 99% of our funding is donation based right now. So it's literally just the community. If you want to talk about mutual aid, it's literally like the community is just sending us money. A lot of people are putting together events and donating the money. They're using art to donate money, which is like what I love. We have some match campaigns with like doTERRA, essential oils, and we have a lot of support from realtor groups because they're feeling that they want to repent for their for what they've done. So we're getting a lot of support from them. My committee is we have some realtors, we have contractors, we have architects on the committee that help with like project management. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at, and we're just continuing to try to raise money and just throwing it at these families in that form of just repairing their homes. And hopefully as we grow and get more money, we can do some of the more cosmetic work that can build raise property values, build equity, and obviously we got to think about property taxes, which is why we have we have people in the banking industry that help us with some of that stuff, finding resources, and we don't ever do any work that would put a family in jeopardy of losing their home because property taxes raised. So a lot of none of our work has done that yet. So and yeah, that's what we're doing right now, and it's Taking Ownership PDX LLC.
Thank you, Randall and Lisa. I thought maybe before we kind of open it up to others to maybe ask you guys questions, and maybe this is putting you too much on the spot, but do you guys have questions for each other that we sort of can listen in on to kind of understand your specific worlds that you're involved in, maybe understand more broadly, I guess, the mutual aid realities across the country? I realize that your experiences may be more Portland centric, but I would venture to guess that with news coverage, you're hearing from others from different parts of the country. And I mean, I'd be curious to hear your guys' take and experiences about where this is leading to, why does it show up in the first place? Is this really the answer, or is this, yeah, I mean, anything in those regards, I think we would be curious to hear. And like I said, those who are listening in, if you've got questions, to start thinking about them and put them in the chat, and we'll take them from there.
I do want to make one more mention in regards of mutual aid and how this has benefited me and is going to spark another project that we're going to do. I had a woman reach out to me through my organization, and she wanted to sell one of her homes in the Albina neighborhood to a person of color for what's left on the mortgage. And so, me being a person of color, I took up on that, and I just now closing on that home. And she sold it for, a very affordable price, and gifted me a bunch of equity and put a Black family back into it, what was a historically Black community. And so we're really going to push that that movement. I know that's a very radical move, but we really hope to get people who have those kind of means to do some, to do some radical moves like that.
Yeah. I think Portland's ready for those radical moves. And I'm okay about the repenting and the reparations. I'm on that, and that's part of this mutual aid in this time and place too, is that people really want to, do a lot about what was going on in the past and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Randal, are you finding a lot of that in the community, that you're, getting money from, just receiving money from? They're just like, listen, this is time, it's come. We need to straighten this stuff out, and it doesn't look like our government's going to do it, our local government's going to do it, or even our neighborhood associations are going to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one, the fact that I had a reputation already, but the fact that I started it so guerrilla style I think that's what they really loved, because they knew that it wasn't going to go into an organization and then sit around all this red tape. They knew I was going to just take it right to the source, and so people want to directly impact the community, and that's definitely what we're doing. So I think that's what gained the trust of the community, that they can actually contribute to some reparations to a community that's dwindling fast.
Right. And I love the guerrilla style. I'm all about it. That's right.
Yeah.
And Kai, to answer your question, I haven't always been in Portland. I'm actually only 7 years into, Portland, and I actually split my times. I lived for 5 years in Portland, and then had to go back to the East Coast for work. Actually, my partner's work. So I'm split right now. I'm actually sitting in Connecticut, where my whole mutual aid started as a, college student and feeding the poor people around my college campus. So I just kind of took that wherever I went to. So I was in Texas for a while, Florida, and then in Portland. But Portland has my heart, and Portland is where I have found the most response. I lived in Southeast, the most need there, especially with the houseless, with the Black population, so many friends in that area. And so I eventually, because I'm fairly close to retirement, that will be the place that I go back to. So I keep, time in. I'm kind of 2 months there, 2 months back east, 2 months, but eventually I'll be there again solidly.
Yeah, and to answer your question about what I'm seeing around the country, I do have some people who have wanted to take my model and bring it to Baltimore, or bring it to Chicago, Seattle, and places like that. So they haven't quite got it off the ground yet, but I know that it's something that, especially in Baltimore, I have a buddy that's really working on getting a similar project going.
Yeah, even just in the bigger cities in Oregon, reaching out to there and going from there. So we did the P2P loans in Portland. Now we're in Eugene. Next up, Salem.
Well, in the spirit of guerrilla style, mixing it up, let's just maybe jump into some questions. Looks like we got a couple here. One was kind of to that question about the realtors and their ability really to repent. If you guys want to talk more about that sort of reality. And then we have a additional question around just kind of how you got into this work. And I think a good question based on what you just said, which is how does one go about starting this in a new community? If there's any sort of, words to the wise from both of your guys' experience. So I guess first question is just if there's anything else around just the power of property, and of course property in the form of development, which includes realtors and all of the stuff that urban environments primarily have seen, though it's not just been urban environments that have seen development for development's sake. So I don't know what else you guys have to say around that, either specifically on the mutual aid stuff or just even more broadly on a political basis.
Well, I don't know if, I think that they can repent. I think realtors can repent. I think developers can, but it's going to take radical action. It's going to take developing. Well, I actually know that they're starting like an act where Black people can move back into neighborhoods that they, if they can show proof that they lived there before before gentrification. And I don't know the details of that, but I know they're trying to do initiatives like that. I know they're building affordable housing and prioritizing Black and brown communities to live there. But yeah, I don't think that like the realtor groups sending me $20,000 is truly repenting, because to be real, the Black communities are gone. There's really not a concentrated Black community in Portland anymore. It used to be like that. I mean, I guess you go out to the numbers now, which are, you know, far east, and you might see that out there. It's very diverse out there, but that's just because it's correlated with low income. But it's going to take radical moves like what just happened to me, moving a family back in at affordable, at an affordable mortgage, and gifting equity like that. And we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But
yeah,
it's going to take more than $20,000 donations. I know that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I think a lot of banks, especially, and realtors are trying to do away with the damage that was done through gentrification and through redlining, you know, which was a huge thing for the Black community in Portland. People not allowed to buy houses in certain places. So what I'm finding now is banks are now people are starting to vote with their pocketbook, right? They're starting to move their money from banks who are currently involved in this kind of systemic racism, and they're removing their money from them. Some of the banks, especially local Portland banks, are actually seeing a run on their, you know, people moving to credit unions who are doing the work with the immigration communities, with the Black communities, with the Hispanic communities. And realtors are finding that too. If people find out that they're using a realtor who is involved in redlining or promotes gentrification, or that false sense of, I don't know if anybody knows about what they call affordable housing in Portland. So you're going to let a person gentrify an area if they allow so many units of affordable housing. And I'm putting that in quotes because affordable housing is not what we need. We need LMI, lower to middle class, middle income housing. Even affordable housing is not affordable for the average person working minimum wage. So there's a whole kind of deceptive practice going on. And I think people are starting to catch on to that because we're talking about it, and they're trying to move the needle on who gets their money and their business. And I'm hoping that becomes I'm a big promoter of that and a big talker of that. And I know a lot of the other mutual aid, Cameron Witten with the Black Resilience Fund, and a few other of the heavy hitters in town are also starting to be very vocal about that kind of stuff. You know, even so far as we're gathering money from the community, where are we going to put it? Who's going to hold it? So.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, that lower to middle class. That's who we primarily serve, is that lower to middle class, that kind of working poor, where they make enough money, maybe, you know, they have to choose between paying their mortgage and then making some of their bills, and they definitely don't have money to do any of the repairs. And you know, one thing I'm pushing whenever I have my interviews is to trying to change this narrative is like, you know, when white people move into these communities, they don't have that relationship with maybe the Black family. They might see a home that looks tore down and they're going to call the city and get liens put on the home, put fees on the home, instead of going to them with some compassion and asking why does your home look this way? What, you know, that's that mutual aid. Like, how do we fix that? But a long-term goal of mine is to be able to either talk some of these realtor groups into, or I don't know how to do this. I'm pretty naive in this regard, but like, how do we get rid of that 20% down payment need? Because there's families out there that can't afford mortgages. My mortgage is going to be $300 to $400 less than my rent is, and my house that I'm moving into is 2.5 times bigger. So if we can somehow figure out a way to find an equitable way to bypass these down payments and give people an opportunity to own homes in these neighborhoods again, I think that's a great start. And I hope maybe taking ownership could provide down payments as well for families.
We've got a number of questions in chat. I'm trying to kind of see if there's a way to combine some of these or figure out how to go from here. There was a question just on, how does something like mutual aid work emerge in a new place? Like how would one go about sort of getting involved or being proactive to start something? Lisa, I think there's a question directed at you around the structure needed to manage the donations towards person-to-person loans and repayment. Someone was interested in what that looks like. And then, I'll just hold it there. We've got a couple others. So basically, how do these things emerge? Or if someone wanted to start, how do they go about even thinking about it? And then maybe the specific question just around the person-to-person loans and what do you have to think about in regards to that specific world?
Okay, I can tackle both of those. Starting an organization, mutual aid organization, just takes a will and desire to see a change, and gathering community members who are like-minded and putting that all together. The work I do through Advocacy 5 is nonprofit work, and that I kind of, it's still mutual aid, but it also, the other groups, the EWOCs and the mutual aid stations that we set up, to me are that kind of still that guerrilla mutual aid. And you can go either way. It's all going to be mutual aid but you're going to have more, you're going to have your hand tied a little bit more with a 501c3 than you are with just an organization. In fact, we've talked many times about moving, and have once moved Advocacy 5 into just a street organization in order to get rid of some of these filings and the money they want for filings. And, everybody wants their 2 cents. So I think that it's more just a will to want to change things, started by yourself, and people will join. There's also hundreds of mutual aid chats out there on Facebook. We have one for Portland, We Help Us Mutual Aid. That's one that there are a bunch of different groups involved in. We get all in there and we talk about, how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that and who has this and who has that. And it all seems to come together. It's a lot of work, but it seems to come together. You also have to manage your expectations, and you have to manage how much of a commitment you want this to be, because it can quickly take over your life. I think Randall can speak to that. And so that's how that to me is the basics of starting anything. It's like starting any group. There's a need for it. You want to be that person who pilots it or gets the people around, or there's already a group doing what you want to do and you find them and join it and just make it more robust with your ideas and your help, and bring your friends along. And the second question was, I'm going to forget about.
Yeah, there was a question just, I think, maybe on the mechanics of how the person-to-person loans and repayment operate, like sort of what sort of structure. And maybe you already answered that, but that was the question.
Yeah, no, it's a very simple structure. We don't want to make it complicated for anybody. We have a hotline that people call into. We have kind of a board that goes over the requests, the amount. Right now, we're only dealing with Advocacy 5 deals up with up to $2,500 loans. The one in Eugene that we started, they do $1,200 loans, and they'll eventually grow. Then the board shoots it out to the community. We have kind of a network of people who have already signed on to be contributors. They say, I want to do $50 toward this loan, $100 toward case number 17, 18, 19. We gather the money. Once the loan is filled, we contact the person who asked for the loan. We set up a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that, this is a mutual aid service. It is, not about interest. You have X amount of time to pay back the loan, which is very generous. And if you ever run into trouble, we renegotiate the loan. And they sign it and the lenders sign it and away we go.
Thank you.
It can be made difficult. We don't like to make it difficult.
And similar for my structure, it's very simple. Honestly, it's even more simple than that. It's growing, but I just now got forms for them to sign. I've just been giving the money away.
Yep.
Literally just been like, what do you need? Oh, okay, here you go.
That works.
We've been pulling permits. We work closely with the city now. And so they've been expediting our permit processes and even giving us home referrals. So we definitely do all the right things in that regard. I mean, if anything, we're just not covering our ass the best, but the beauty is like the community's behind us. And I can't imagine anybody really going after a reparation-based organization. I mean, it wouldn't look good for them. But we just got waivers for our volunteers. We do have over 250 volunteers signed up. And so we use them for like cleanup jobs and you know, not things that don't involve like messing with the integrity of homes. And we just got another form for the homeowners where we just kind of like write down what we will take care of, because we can't do like full renovations or anything. So we'll write down, okay, we'll do your roof and we'll do some siding, and then, you know, they give us some information and they agree that we'll do that. But the like late Lisa said, the goal was to keep this simple. I think one of the biggest issues is we're definitely not the first culturally specific organization in Portland, but one of the complaints that I've heard is that it is very difficult to access services. Yeah, very particular, a lot of stipulations that make it very hard for families, especially that middle class, that working poor class, it's really hard for them to qualify for resources for a lot of these organizations.
Yeah, I think a lot of mutual aid is about meeting people where they are, you know, and not making them chase after that carrot.
Right.
Yeah. No one needs that. No one deserves to have to do that. So.
We've got a question that you guys kind of touched on, or I think Randall, you did a little bit, which was, it's phrased this way. It says, how does organizing to meet the basic needs of people help build power towards larger change to combat gentrification? So the work that's going on, how do you guys see that building towards really taking on gentrification as it's, manifested? What's your guys' thought there?
Well, I mean, a big part of what we're doing is that we're raising awareness about this situation. The Black community is so small in Portland that you don't even, like, if you're a white person in Portland, you don't even have to like interact with it. You don't even have to know it exists. And one thing that we are doing is like raising awareness about what is going on with these homeowners, about the predatory developers that come to their home once a week, predatory lenders that I have homeowners that paid their house off in 1970 for $40,000, but now owe $400,000 because of a predatory loan that they got. Raising that awareness, working closely with the city, and the big reason why I wanted to start this, because I wanted to light a fire under the city. I wanted to be like, well, why do I, just some, Joe Schmo off the street, got to do this work when y'all have all the funding, have all the resources, and you're going over to these houses and putting liens on them and fines on them instead of having some compassion and seeing how you can help them when you have that power, and it's working. They really are, like, we've definitely overturned a ton of liens and fines on homes. I think that's going to help. We're meeting with all kinds of architecture firms and developers and talking about ways that they can improve their practices and bring the Black community back into Portland. And as we grow and get more funding, hopefully we can build property value, which build generational wealth. Where, in my situation, where in the radical situation that I just experienced, where I just got a home and I'm literally got gifted about $400,000 in equity. I'm able to buy more homes and potentially, and that's going to build BIPOC home ownership and business ownership. So that's what I'm hoping, and that's what I'm trying to do, is really just advocacy for these homeowners and business owners, and raising awareness and really urging a change of practices.
Yeah, and we're finding, what, like Randall is speaking to, we're finding that when you put somebody in a place where they can gain equity in whatever they're doing, generational wealth, so they buy a house for what should be market value, from an organization like Randall, they buy a house that would go on the market for, and people would start bidding at it at 500,000 for $250,000. They have equity in that loan, in that home, the minute they step across that threshold with their keys. And then they can start thinking about, I really want to start a business. You know what I mean? I can now take that $200,000 equity and start a brick and mortar business or whatever they want to do. They don't have to wait for 10 years or 20 years to build that equity. It's instantaneous. And that to me is the greatest part of what you're doing, Randall.
We've got this question for the both of you. They wrote here, I'm interested in the concept of starting an effort spontaneously from the ground up. A group of us on the Central Coast are wanting to position ourselves to assist neighbors, especially BIPOC and immigrant communities who might be at risk if there's a post-election uprising from the right. Any suggestions about letting people know, establishing safety, recruiting resources, etc.?
Okay, so starting one for the ground up, I think it's just, first of all, look into what's around you, or maybe something that is the same in Portland that you want to do, and kind of take clues from them, talk to their leadership, talk to what they're doing, how to manifest it where you live. If you already know what you want to do, what the actual goal is, what the steps that you need to take, then find the people who can help you work those steps until you get to the goal of the mutual aid that you want to participate in or offer. Again, we try to make it harder than it really is. It really isn't just about, not sticking your toe in the water, but jumping in with both feet and, gathering a whole bunch of people around you as life rafts and just going for it.
And just to be clear about the question, it was how does one help a neighbor or somebody they know in the BIPOC community? Is that?
Yeah, if you look in the chat, it was someone who lives on the Central Coast, Oregon, who's looking potentially to have some mutual aid for neighbors, and then specifically for BIPOC and immigrant communities in case there's, basically uprisings and other things related to the political right, and how that may affect those communities if there's things that they can do sort of in a mutual aid kind of way, to help them, and what to be thinking about.
Well, if we're talking about the safety during an uprise, I really hope that the safety of a BIPOC community or immigrant community. I really hope that you can use your privilege in some way. I know, in the protests, oftentimes white people will play the front, and will play in front of the cops. So because there's a less chance of you being harmed in that instance. That's a great way to go about it. Yeah, and I think just having conversations with people that that are maybe racist or conservative, or just have those type of views. I think that's one of the biggest parts, is white people having these conversations amongst white people. I think it's very effective, especially with family members at the dinner table, things like that. Just kind of sharing what you've learned. I think that's a great way to go about it. Otherwise, I think Lisa nailed it.
We've got a string of questions from one of the attendees. I'm just going to pick one here. He asks, how could mutual aid apply to helping people camping on sidewalks? Is there a community right to have a place for emergency camping to help people in need? So looking at that population, I guess, what have you guys seen there in the sense of things that are either going on or that you've either been involved in or know people are working with that population of the Portland community or other places?
That would be a question for me. running a houseless organization. I mean, everybody has a right to sleep someplace, and the city ordinances have been pushing against us and pushing against us, which has taken us. One of my first guerrilla things was to set up a camp for domestic violence women who had suffered domestic violence in the Lentz neighborhood. And we got, I think, 8 women in there. The city tried to shut us down. We brought up an old ordinance that, because there's lots of hidden laws in whatever city or county or whatever you're looking for, that cities like to hide and bury in their city codes. So this one was, it gave the public the right when a housing state of emergency was called to get together in their communities and take structures or build structures to house people. So we set up this camp. The city eventually told us to move, but all 8 of those women gained access to housing. So, it was a guerrilla, move that lasted about 2 weeks, but everybody that was involved in it gained access to housing. And I think we just have to take more chances like that. We have to sit inside, Chapman Square across from the Justice Center, all of the privileged people, take a shift and make sure that all the houseless people that are there stay there until somebody gets them housing. Somebody, creates housing for them. Otherwise, that's where they're going to live. And we're going to set up an on-site mutual aid station to allow them to live their best lives.
And, I don't have all the facts right now, or I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm heard that there are more vacant homes owned by banks than there are homeless people or houseless people. And that is correct.
That is correct.
So I believe Salt Lake City at one point was where they were just housing their houseless and putting, and it was incredibly effective because similar to what Lisa said earlier, I mean, how are they supposed to get on their feet if they don't even have an address, if they don't have a shelter, they don't have access to professional clothing, showers, I've known a number of people who have been houseless and it severely impacts their mental health, being on the streets, being that lack of safety that you get from a stable home. So I think a radical move like just providing housing for the houseless, if it's available, but we know how capitalism works and how our banks like to work.
Yep. One of the other things we do as a mutual aid Advocacy 5 also goes into the community and finds people who want to help people, not necessarily with their money or a portion of their money, but they're actually taking people into their homes, families who have fallen onto the street, especially in this current crisis. And then the last one that we had a few years ago when ice storms were really bad and schools were shut down for days and people lost work. A lot of families that were right on that cusp fell onto the street. We found community members right in their neighborhood who were willing to turn a garage into a mini apartment. So we raised community funds for them to renovate, put in a bathroom, put in a sink and a kitchen, and make a 1-room living space for a family of 3 or 4. And that continued for 6 months to a year. And we have found many of those community members. We started off with 19 housed people from this effort. We still have 12 that are going strong. And when one family, person, couple graduates into their own housing through our peer-to-peer loans or, just gaining stability creates such an awesome opportunity for people to move forward. Just that stability. That 12 are still, they turn them over and find another family or another couple or another person to house. It's amazing.
We had another question kind of riffing off of what you guys just talked about in the sense of the financial institutions and the banking world and such. Someone wrote here the idea, what about state banks? Could they eliminate the capacity for predatory lenders from exploiting the financially vulnerable? So have either of you thought about just sort of the institutionalization of how finances work and perhaps advocating for a very different system where that all stems from, or what sort of input or I guess information can you share with us around that particular question?
I don't really have a lot of information. I hope so. I hope they start doing that. I know that after the housing crisis or the Great Recession, they weren't pushing those adjustable mortgages or home loans, I should say. And so because those were just screwing people over. So I know that that's not something that they really push anymore, but personally, I don't have a whole lot of information. I do have a banker on my committee that I kind of just like delegate those things to, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
I clear away from major banks and only work with credit unions in our community, credit unions who are community minded, who have gifted us money. But also I push them on this. You know, if I attend a meeting that they like to ask me to attend to give a presentation, and then they'll give me, you know, a few $1,000s, I like to push the envelope and continually ask them, what are you doing for the disenfranchised community? What are you doing for the BIPOC and the immigrant, you know, community? How are you handling those people and their inability to access loans? You know, how are you making it affordable? And a lot of them have restructured in certain ways. They're still not anywhere near where I think they should be, but you know, I'm a mutual aid person all the way, and they should be gathering funds for the community within their own banking system and giving those $20,000 down payments to people. You know, that's an easy ask for a bank to ask some of their heavy hitters who hold a lot of money in their bank to take $20,000 and give it to this person who is eligible in every other way for a mortgage.
I agree, and I need to do more of that. I need to start talking to the banks.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm not wrong, there's been a couple of things added into chat. Someone added in a link to a community supported shelter in Eugene for reference. At the moment, at least, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up. I do invite people to please throw some others in there if you have them. I guess as we've been talking, Lisa and Randall, have other things been brought up, or things that haven't been covered that you think would be beneficial for us to hear about in either your specific work or just the mutual aid world itself, or, you know, questions obviously leading towards, you know, deeper systems change, so that in some ways, you know, the mutual aid work could take a much different form versus being what it is today, which is often, you know, coming from either neglect of the system one way or the other, or a direct result of the system, and some combination. And so, yeah, so I don't know if you guys have any other kind of thoughts or words of advice that you want to throw out there, and we'll see if some other questions pop up.
Well, I think that, you know, like with everything else, we have to stop being reactive and be proactive. And I think a lot of the, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement has really pushed a lot of that to the forefront. And I'm so grateful for it, although I'm also horrified about why it had to come about, that we weren't paying attention to these things beforehand, that we weren't, you know, gathering those resources for when times like this came. For any reason. And we've had climate crisis, we've had, you know, crises of weather that, you know, where people are losing home and losing job time and not being paid because, you know, they can't get to work. It's all over. And I think that we as a community, as a whole community, a world community, have to get better about preparing for these things and shoring people up all the time. Just a constant state of mutual aid. It's out there. And it can be accessed. And I think that, you know, we've gotten so used to putting out the fires, literally these days, and not tending to the things when everything goes back to la la land. Especially white people tend to just back off of all of this and say, okay, I did my bit, now I'm comfortable and happy again, and I'm just going to stay here. No more of that. I've been fighting against that for my entire life. And now it's come to a pivotal point with everything where I think that this just has to go on, and it has to get bigger and better.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I think it's just, I think it's so important to lose that individualistic mindset that capitalism breeds, to where it's like, let me figure out how to take care of my immediate family, my, this, and instead of thinking of the greater community. And also just having an understanding that if you are investing in your community, you are investing in yourself, you are investing in your family. I mean, one thing I learned early, I became a father as a teenager, and that's when it really clicked with me. I know a lot of people around me are like, I'm just going to get my money and do me to take care of me and my sons or whatever, but or me and my kids. But uh, it really clicked to me that it's really important that I do my part to improve the community around, because that's where my kids are going to be at the most. They're not going to be indoors all the time. They're not going to be home. And so I think that's just one thing I hope my organization and organizations like Lisa's as well start inspiring people to just kind of understand that community is important and it is beneficial to you as well.
Well, as you guys were talking, a couple other things came into the chat. One was, it sounds like there really shouldn't be a houseless problem in our society, given that there are available resources, empty buildings that could be resourced to help people in need. And they're wondering if this is a correct assumption, meaning there's capacity, but not access. What have you guys experienced around that, and how have you thought about that?
There is capacity, and more than enough capacity. There's a political, there's no will in the political beings that run our city to access that stuff and let people from the community come in and make it appropriate for people to live in. And lots of gentrifying builders who have gone, or real estate agents or whoever, have gone in and built huge amounts of housing, and it isn't even filled. And they keep getting money from the city to build them because we think we're creating infrastructure for all the people who are going to flood into Portland, when we can be lifting people up and into housing and having them work instead of hiring people from out of state and enticing more people from out of state, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with whoever wants to come in, but not when it's at the expense of somebody else who should have housing.
I agree. I think there's definitely a capacity. I think that we have more than enough resources. I don't want to give it out to greedy people, but I think greed is a mental health, mental illness, or in some ways. I think it's like a disease, or they're just like so detached from reality that they don't know how, don't know how to give it. But I mean, it showed this year when the pandemic, when they were able to create money out of thin air and give everybody stimulus checks and bail out the corporations with billion-dollar bailouts. Money can just be created. It can just be given away. And I think that played a big role in what inspired a lot of people. Like, hold on, wait, you just created money and gave us all $1,200, and and that's all they gave us. But which shows the greed. But yeah, I think it's evident that they have the resources. There's the housing there. It's definitely enough to go around. It's a power play.
Absolutely a power play. Can I speak to this Antonio Gisbert or Gisbert? I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. About the Roscas that he's bringing up. So he's bringing up that he just learned about the Heart of Valley, has implemented a couple of rotating savings and credit associations, not a new idea, but basically a lending club, completely independent of commercial banking. And yes, I have looked into that, and that's a great idea going forward, instead of just having community loans and MOUs, to make it a little more structured, where some of the credit unions and the savings unions, like he said, for example, 12 people pay $100 each month. Every month, one person gets the $1,200. I think that is a great thing to really start to explore among our communities of, interested in banking, access, interested in helping in this way.
We had a question before that one that you just read through, Lisa, on has Energy Trust of Oregon been a good partner with the energy conservation measures? I don't know if you could see that question about 2 up from there, if either of you have anything there.
Yeah, I actually work pretty close with Energy Trust. Well, I shouldn't say that. I communicate with them often, but I'm not able to use their services because I don't have general liability insurance. One of those, things that one of those loopholes or hoops you have to jump through. So no, they haven't been helpful yet. Once I get insurance, we'll be able to get rebates on these window replacements that we're doing, and these assessments that we do at the homes. We'll be able to get some rebates, and they'll give us some money. But yeah, and they're really diligent about wanting to work with us, so that's pretty cool. But at this time, we haven't been able to utilize them yet.
We've got a question here. Do you two see Portland's culture changing at all thanks to the uprisings and BLM activism? What have you seen there? What kind of comments, if anything, do you have around that question?
I have, specifically in the white community, seen, the benefits of having people wake up, having this in their face, on their TV, in front of them, being engaged and activated, even if right now some of them are only talking about it within their homes. They are forcing, friendships to grow with them and learn about this. I'm attached to a lot of teachers in Portland, and I love that they are taking this into the classroom, that they are now have specific people who do, BIPOC, racial, racism, anti-racism learning and training. That to me is a phenomenal thing that should have happened in Portland tens of years ago. So those are the direct things that I've been seeing, and the more and compassion and people's willingness to give, even if they are afraid to give of their time and their energy. They have money and they are willing to put it into the right places.
I've seen a lot. I mean, white people have never been nicer to me than they are now. And even when I'm playing music loud in my car, I used to get some looks, some disgusting looks in the past, and now, smiles and waves. And I mean, for me individually, this has been the best year of my life. I mean, I got given a house, because of this. I now run an organization that does the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life, while also making a livable wage for the first time in my life. So there's in those ways, and I know there's been a lot of opportunities for a lot of my POC friends and community as well. But the big thing is we have a voice, and people are listening now, and they want to listen, and they bring us to the table and want to hear what has historically and currently has been oppressing us and impacting us, and what are some next steps. So I definitely see the change. I've definitely seen the change significantly, actually.
I guess to skip over, there's a couple more questions, I think, and then we can think about wrapping it up. But to kind of skip over the one just after that, there's a question around what the two of you feel would be the top demands for city government, let's say, and state government, and the work you're involved in. Like if you had to put demands forward to them, or even if I mean, what would you be demanding, or what do you think are the top demands for, I guess, government to be looking at if you had the opportunity to be making those outside of what you're already doing through your own work?
Well, definitely defunding the police and allocating that funding to other resources, and taking some of those tasks off of the police force, right? So we don't need the police to show up to a mental health crisis. We need a mental health professional, a therapist of some sort, and we need them to be able to make a livable wage, a healthy wage. So I actually, before I started this, worked in the mental health sector. I was a student advocate at Portland Youth Builders, and that's what I did, is I helped provide resources to my students to make sure that they were able to make it through the program. Some of those barriers that were happening in their life. So, and also I've been a residential treatment counselor and a mentor, and all of that has been around mental health. And let me tell you, at a lot of those jobs, I didn't make enough money, and I was sleeping on the floor in the same room as my kids. And I developed a severe general anxiety disorder, taking on that vicarious trauma and then not being able to take care of myself. So, which is another reason why I started this organization, because marching for me in big crowds is not easy because of my anxiety. But we need to be able to allocate funding and make sure that we have proper resources to handle these circumstances, so that we don't have police officers who only get 9 months of training handling situations where people who've been in school for 6 to 8 years, or 4 to 8 years, who are specialized in these situations. We need to allocate the funding that way, and that's one thing I'm heavily advocating for, just because I've seen the consequences of police handling situations that they're not equipped for, and so we need to get that money to people that are equipped for it.
I agree. Defunding police is on the top, of my list of things, and allocating money that goes to many services that do not do the work they are supposed to be doing. One of my biggest things, since, and I've sat at all kinds of cities and towns tables, and when Hales was in, we sat at the table there. When Wheeler came in, we sat down at that table, asked for reallocation of funds, asked for access of funds, and even if they didn't want to give us the money, to give us the goods, blankets for the houseless, food for the houseless, tents for the houseless. And there was a million things of red tape that we had to go through. I'm like, pick anybody on your team, anybody in the city, and have them follow us around and watch what we do, and then give us the goods that we need. And there's always a reason why they get warehoused and don't get out onto the streets. That's a big problem with me. So resource hoarding is a huge thing with me. You get the resource, you get it out onto the streets. There will always be, through mutual aid, more resources coming in. So I think, that's a big thing for me. And a big thing about just equity across the boards, equity in education, equity in banking, equity in home ownership, in business ownership. Those are my will be and have been my big fights.
We had a question here, which sounds like actually a call to action around the idea of going on a debt strike until everyone gets $600 a week. So, and then kind of tied into that question about demands, I have a question here directed at you, Lisa, around what initiatives or mandates could or should be directed to banks, credit unions to serve the LMI community to get into housing, and then a follow-up question of what additional complementary assistance could or should be provided to enable the banks to serve public interest for people to access housing. So if you have any sort of comment there just on what could or should be done to really change that particular world or try to begin changing it.
Okay, yeah, I think initiatives need to be that banks and credit unions need to push the city to not allow developers to not put in LMI housing, or the city has to come up with, if they're only going to build, upscale or affordable housing, the city has to meet those in the MLI bracket with addition to funding. I'm losing the words for what that's called, but when you give somebody money that they need to make it to the next level. Anybody help me out with that vocab word? Anyway, that they subsidize. There you go. That portion. And then people can begin to, live in places they should live in and inhabit, and be able to live in places where they can walk down on the street and go to their local coffee shop and be part of the community and potentially open a business there. And those are the pushes that I would like to see, where we just have to make it so that there's that bottom step of people stepping into housing with assistance, with money, and also with their rent being at an accessible rate for people who are working minimum wage jobs, and also the push for minimum wage to go up. So it's a living wage. That's all I have. I'm not a banking person per se. I try to steer away, except for to steer them towards just being more community minded. But it's a good question, and it's something that will be interesting to look into more.
And if they're going to boost minimum wage, we can't we can't allow inflation to go up too. I mean, that's the biggest problem, right? So it's like
Yes.
inflation has increased significantly more than our wages have, and that's what a lot of the counter arguments is like. Well, if they go up to $15 minimum wage, they'll just make a turkey burger $25, which I saw in San Francisco. So it's so that's one thing we got to somehow figure out how to stop.
Yes, I think they should stagnate a lot of rents for a certain amount of time until that living wage comes about. I love the idea of the $600 universal wage, for everybody from the very beginning. People don't want it, they can throw it back for other people.
I have a question. I don't remember who asked it, but what would a debt strike look like? Is that just we just don't pay our debt and we take all our money out the banks and just have cash?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they were talking about, but I think it's a long
Because
way.
I don't know. I'm a little nervous to have thousands of dollars just sitting in my house, um, but I like the idea.
I do too. I like the idea of just not, stopping to pay the outrageous debts that have put upon us. Not the regular old ones that we need for our society to keep going, but yeah, for debts, for predatory lending, for getting into credit card debt because you don't make a living wage, that you don't have enough money, that universal wages are not all of the things that predatory, and it's all predatory lending, right? All the things all the debt and all the burden that has put on, cost burden renters, cost burden homeowners, all of that. Just stop paying it.
Yeah, that's what I plan to do with my student loans too. I'm just not going to pay it.
So I think we're nearing time, and to honor maybe one aspect of our political season, which really hasn't been much of a substantive quality reality, in my opinion. I thought I would each give you some closing remarks. So pretending we're in a debate format here. So Randal or Lisa, do you have any sort of closing comments you want to make for the people here tonight? And you guys can duke it out about who goes first.
How about we go in together?
Well, I was just gonna say where to find us and where to support us. Really, I mean, you can go to takingownershippdx.org to learn more about. I'll put it in the chat here, just to learn more about what we're doing. We need to update it a little bit with the projects that we've done. We've done a number of projects. If you want to see some of the projects we've done, in the meantime, because we're in the middle of updating it, you can go to our Instagram page, which is just Taking Ownership PDX, or Facebook as well. We have a lot of posts showing some of the work we've done there. And if you would like to donate, you can donate through the website. It goes to our fiscal sponsor. So when you donate, it will say All Ages Music PDX. I know that sometimes people get a little confused, like what we want. That's not where we want to go, but that is where you want it to go, because that's our fiscal sponsor. And if you want to volunteer, we are kind of discouraging volunteers right now, just because unless you're a licensed, bonded, and insured worker, skilled worker, because we can utilize that. But we have more than enough non-licensed, bonded, and insured people to volunteer. And if you know of any resources, construction resources, anything housing related resources that you want to shoot our way, please send it my way, and I'll put my email in there as well. It's takingownershippdx@gmail.com.
Yeah, and same for me. You can go on to my Facebook page. I don't have a website right now. I'm kind of in the middle of overhauling it and have been for a while, which is very funny because that's what I do for a living. But I haven't found any time to actually get to it between clients and doing this work, which is the majority of my work these days. But it has a PayPal, Cash App listed on our Facebook page. You can also message me anytime through the Advocacy 5 Facebook page, or there's also a number listed. Give me a call. I'd love to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, a huge thank you to the both of you, mostly for the work you're engaged in, and then clearly for making time this evening. Lisa, I had no idea you made it extra difficult for yourself by being on the East Coast for this. So thank you for staying up in the wee hours for this.
I work on Portland time only, so really doesn't matter what time it is here. I'm always on Portland time.
I will send out a link to this event. I recorded it through Zoom. Once you get it, if you want to retain it, download it. We'll also look for a way to put it up and out there somewhere so others can see it beyond the people that are here tonight. And just to say, in about a month from now, the Oregon Community Rights Network is going to have another event through Zoom, and the topic is going to be on preemption, which sounds boring. But we talked, in fact, a lot about preemption tonight without realizing it, perhaps. Rent control, minimum wage, other aspects of development are all things of which are realities in Portland and other places. What I mean by that is if the community wants to advocate for different standards on rent control, well, they're preempted today. Or if Portland wanted a living wage, well, you're preempted from actually putting that forward because the state says it's going to set what the minimum wage is. So we're going to dig into that next month. So for those of you who joined tonight, you may have an interest in jumping into that conversation about learning more about that particular world. That's all I have for tonight. Again, thanks everyone for joining. And most of all, thank you, Lisa and Randall, for making the time and for the work you do. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everybody who attended. Yep. Great to meet you, Randall.